This is the SAU Report, a program featuring interviews with the faculty, staff, students, and alumni of Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of the SAU Report. I am Holleman.
And I'm Cyndy Williams. And today we have Sarah Cotaya and Bryan Jones from Media Roundtable. Sarah, which media is better in terms of getting information?
I feel that actually I like to watch the news. I think that with visuals and you can see actual shots, you know, like action when they videotape or show clips of something that happened, that you tend to get more of a feel for what was actually going on. And I think that with as commentators you can interview people and see it all. It just kind of ties it all together and you can bring more out of it and form your own opinion better.
Bryan, in your opinion, does news exploit or aware society about different social issues?
Occasionally they do. Sometimes they focus too much on some social issues and not enough on what affects the people that are around who are listening to the news.
Sarah, how are different news issues such as the war in Afghanistan being covered in local and national news?
I think that they are showing as much as the U.S. government will allow them to show. I know that when it comes to war and military maneuvers that the U.S. doesn't exactly want people to know everything that's going on, and I think they're being allowed to show what the government's allowing them to show.
Do you think they should be showing more, or it should be, or do you think they should be digging a little bit more, or?
I would kind of like to know what's going on. You know, I would actually like to know the whole truth. And, but I mean, I understand that for probably, you know, safety reasons that they don't want to tell everybody everything that's going on.
Bryan, in your opinion, can media be biased on certain issues?
Oh, definitely. Occasionally they're biased because of money or different issues like that. Like a company wouldn't report something bad against the head company that owns them. Like CNN, I understand, they wouldn't. They're owned by Disney, I think. I forget, but they wouldn't report something.
Time Warner.
Time Warner. Okay. They wouldn't report something bad against Time Warner, I'm sure. Things like that. So they are biased in favor of their paycheck, like most people.
Okay, recently a celebrity, she was on, I can't think of her name, but she was on NYPD Blue. She has quit CNN. And so the question is for Bryan, should celebrities be taking on roles as reporters?
If they're capable of handling the job, but some news agencies use actors and stuff as reporters just because they look better on camera and things like that, but they really don't know what they're talking about when they give the news.
So they should be educated, and like most media people.
Yeah, they should be able to handle the questions and convey the news.
Okay.
Sarah, will the internet ever take over the role of newspapers?
I don't think that it will, just for the fact that some people do not have access as easily to the internet. Maybe like 50 years down the road, it might be more of a, you know, more widely used than the newspaper, but I think that the newspaper is pretty much something that's a traditional media source and that people will always use it to get information from. Like the Wall Street Journal, I don't think that will ever be stopped, you know, people will stop subscribing to it.
Because a lot of the internet actually has newspapers on it. I mean, you go, the internet site is the newspaper.
I personally don't use the internet that much when it comes to news and stuff like that. I like the newspaper because I can take it with me. It's portable. You know, if I'm getting the oil in my car changed or something like that, I can take that with me and read it. It's just like a book almost. You know, it's a lot easier and more accessible, I think. So I personally like the newspaper better.
Sarah, recently there's been a big boom in reality TV such as Fear Factor and Survivor. And a couple of years back, the only thing that was basic reality was news programs. So do you think reality such as Survivor is hurting news programs?
I don't think it is because it's people will still, I mean, the news is something that's information, and it's not a drama. Like, I see a Survivor or Real World on MTV as sort of a live soap opera. And I think people are fascinated with the fact American public is fascinated with drama, and they're going to watch that. But at the same time, like, most educated people are going to want to watch the news because they're going to want to know what's going on with the economy or current events, and then we're going to know the weather. I mean, how many people watch the weather? So I don't think that reality TV is going to so much impact the news. I mean, they're even on separate times. They're not even shown at the same time, so it's not even going to compete.
So in the case of Ted Koppel, David Letterman replacing him is not going to happen, very likely.
No, I don't think so. David Letterman is an entertainer, and Ted Koppel is a news reporter.
Bryan, has the media changed since September 11th?
I suppose they have. They try to focus on some of the good things because they realized after September 11th, I recall that some of the news agencies, a lot of the families of the survivors of September 11th were mad at the news agencies because they kept showing the collapse of the buildings over and over again. And in their minds, that was like seeing their loved ones die over and over again. So they've changed in that perspective. After having so many families mad at them and different things like that. And of course, the war in Afghanistan is a result of that. They're definitely focused on that, and things like earthquake in Middle East, somewhere away from where the war is pretty much gone unnoticed in the shadow of the war.
Do you think the viewers have changed how they look at the news, or as often as they look at the news?
The viewers, that's a good question. I recall immediately after September 11th, everybody was watching the news, but I don't know how much long-term effect there would be.
Sarah, in the there have main stars such as George Clooney and many others have been complaining about not enough privacy in their lives, such as if they have families or kids. Do you think celebrities are entitled to some kind of privacy?
I think that they should have privacy when it comes to certain things like their love life and personal information that shouldn't be brought out to the public. Just like people, the only reason people are fascinated with their personal lives is because they're famous. And like I said, the American public is fascinated with drama and stuff like that. And like with Princess Diana's death, I know part of that was caused by the paparazzi chasing her, and I think that people need to respect other people's privacy just like they would want their own privacy respected.
Sarah, what can news stations do to stop from losing ratings?
I believe that people nowadays don't, especially after September 11th, don't want to see so much tragedy, and they want to see more important news, more substance in the news than, shootings that, I mean, I'm sure it affects the people's families and, people that are involved in that specific incident, but I personally don't want to hear an hour's worth of people dying or robberies and stuff like that. I want to hear more stuff about like the economy and, people that are doing good things for the community and in the weather and sports and stuff like that. I don't think that they should focus so much on violence. And I think that the American public is tired of watching stuff like that.
Bryan, there's still, as said before, there's still like a lot of instances where the media does get kind of entertainment-wise or news-wise. Entertainment in the news is kind of rejected. So how do you think news is going to contribute to political and social issues?
How the news affects political and social issues?
Yes, how does that do that?
When elections come up, they definitely follow the people who are running for different offices and stuff and show anything and everything that can be considered bad about that person, and occasionally they do show the good things about those people. But so they do affect how people view things. People do watch the news, and that's where they get their information still, from news on TV for the most part. So,
as far as political issues, do you think we need to know about candidates' personal life and on the news, or should we just focus on what they are doing what they're going to do to help us in the next 4 to 8 years?
I think the news does focus too much on their personal life. Yeah, we do need to know a little bit about them, maybe their personality some, but we don't need to know so much in-depth stuff about them. But yes, we do need to know what they plan to do, what's going to affect us, stuff like that.
Sarah, how can the news relate to teenagers better?
I think that teenagers are more in tune with current events such as sports and entertainment, and to maybe somehow integrate, that's a really tough question, maybe somehow integrate some kind of an entertainment aspect into the news so that teenagers actually want to watch the news more. I think it's just something that if they actually want to know what's going on, they're going to start watching it. And I just don't see teenagers really watching the news a whole lot.
There are some shows that, like on, for example, Comedy Central has a show where they put comedy into the news. They do give all the world news, but they put comedy in it, and that makes, you know, kind of interesting for teenagers to watch. But then on the other side, it's real, not very.
It's just entertainment
right,
value.
Entertainment, but it's still a kind of a grabber.
It's probably teenagers, I don't think, are really involved, and I don't think they really care that much about what's going on unless it's something like dramatic and tragic that, you know, draws everybody into it. I just don't see them watching the news a whole lot.
Well, since we're talking about teenagers, do you feel like what they see on the news, what actually they see, like all the guns, the killings, the drugs, you know, kind of makes them think more of, the public's more doing it than I should do it. Do you feel like that has anything to do with what's going on with teenagers?
Like with the whole, you know, parental advisory on music and stuff like that, I don't really think that the news has an influence on the kids. Like with Columbine, I think that was probably shown a little bit too much, and maybe that made kids want to, or made other people want to repeat that. And I think that if the media doesn't focus, I mean, it was very tragic what happened in Columbine, but to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and it was over-reported, that sick people just decided that they were going to repeat that. And this happens in the movies, and they say that listening to music will do the same thing, or just certain things that you watch or see on TV and movies, they tend to repeat it. And I know that's an ongoing study. So.
Also, the news seems more like a grabber, like hey, you know, let me do something bad, I'll get to be on the news, and everybody gets to see me.
I know that's probably some. I know that I've seen news reports where they say that this person was doing it for an attention getter, and I'm sure there are people that are going to do it. So.
Along those same lines, I noticed that they still do report a lot of who has killings and murders and stuff in the community, but and it's open to both of y'all can jump on this question. Do you think the media has become kind of sensitive to certain issues, or are they still the same as ever?
That's a real good question. She was talking about Columbine earlier. Yes, they're definitely sensitive to violence, such as violence that's out of the ordinary, like school shootings and stuff. But I really don't know. I'll let her answer.
Probably with like he's saying, Columbine, you know, certain things like mass killing of innocent people, mass killings of innocent people, I think are very touchy. Like with 9/11, you know, that was a huge event that, you know, attracted people all around the world were just, you know, glued to their TVs. And I think that stuff like that is probably a really touchy subject when it comes to the news. I mean, because you really don't want to keep showing, like he was talking about with the parents, or the victims' families, you know, seeing it over and over and over again. It becomes a touchy subject, and some people just don't want to see that stuff over and over and over again.
Bryan, should reporters be restricted from receiving different kinds of information?
Be restricted from receiving different kinds of information. Like with the war in Afghanistan, I understand for military purposes they don't need to get information like that, but let's see. Well, they need to report the news and they've got to get their information from somewhere. If it doesn't hurt anyone else, then I think they should be allowed to get that information.
Do you feel like we're putting our reporters in too much danger over there, like across seas?
Sending them overseas to report dangerous things, such as maybe the war in Israel and all that. I think to some extent we are, because you see some of these dedicated reporters and stuff, they've got to get the perfect shot or something like that, and they'll put their lives on the line, and I just think that's totally unnecessary.
Sarah, recently certain local news stations such as KSLA have integrated high definition television or into their media, but my question is to you, what are some changes you have noticed from watching certain local news stations?
Well, I think with the high definition television, that really only comes into play unless you've got that specific TV. So for everybody else that haven't exactly, paid large amounts of money for that TV, it doesn't really change the picture a whole lot. I mean, I've seen the picture on high definition television, and it's unbelievable, the clarity of the pictures. And I think once we get to the point where everybody has a TV that's capable of that type of reception, that it's going to improve the quality of the production and bring broadcasting to a different level.
Along with that high definition TV, have you noticed any other aspects of news specifically that are different?
Not a whole lot.
Okay.
Going back to what we were talking about with the what's on the news and kind of how it affects the people, should media, including television, radio, or the internet, be censored in any way?
Again, if it affects other people and hurts people, such as emotional-wise, or upsets people, or like the celebrities' personal life, if it invades people's privacy, it should be censored. But really, they are reporting what's out there, or they should be, and just spreading the news, doing their job. But for censoring it, I don't think they should report anything that is unnecessary. But
Sarah, I noticed that a lot of kids, when talking about stuff like September 11 work, don't really, and war in Afghanistan, don't really understand what's going on, and they're confused and have a lot of questions. So how can parents play a part in media and news? How can they play a role in informing their kids?
I know that stations like ABC has taken on the role of the family news, where they have a little bit earlier where kids can actually sit down and it's not as violent and certain things are censored, so that way it's not as tragic for little kids. It's more of less impact on a younger generation, that it would they can get the same quality of news without all the drama that's involved with the later newscasts. And I think that parents can actually inform their children what's going on around the world and then around even their city, and not have to explain all the violence that's going on.
Bryan, how can news work better in terms of dealing with minority issues?
dealing with minority issues, well, they try to report what will affect most people, and so oftentimes they do skip over the minorities. But I really don't know. They could maybe have some contacts or whatever. Reporters have a lot of contacts. Possibly they need to try and get more minority people as contacts to inform them of different events and stuff. Like most of us wouldn't know when a Hispanic festival would be, because we're not Hispanic. And again, the news probably wouldn't report that either, because they wouldn't know as a result either. But they just need to get in contact with the minorities more and report on that.
Still on that subject line of minorities, do you think companies such as CBS and NBC and ABC, have you seen, or do you feel they should be doing, do you think they're doing a good job of using minorities, or do you think, and along with minorities, people who are disabled, do you think they're doing a good job of that, or do you think they are lacking in that, Sarah?
I know I know they have anchors that are of African American race. Connie Chung, you know, not a white American. And I think, and I would know behind the scenes, you know, production crew exactly what, you know, who's what race, and I don't think that it would really matter that much as long as you can do your job effectively. Then I think certain issues where people are interviewing certain people, there needs to be probably, you know, if you're interviewing a white supremacist, it probably needs to be a white news reporter, and if you're, you know, if you were to interview somebody like Malcolm X or something, then you would probably go with an African American. I mean, it just depends on who you're interviewing and the topics, because certain people could be biased, or certain people couldn't get the correct information, or the information that would, you know, be effective to the story if they weren't of a certain race.
Once again, media, there are of course different types of media, internet and everything. So this is open once again to both of y'all. What in your opinion, which media would you go to faster? Would you go to the internet, or would you be faster to go to TV to get your information?
I would go to TV. I mean, there's CNN is a 24-hour news broadcast. They have a couple of different stations that are like that, and you can get pretty much news 24 hours a day. The internet, I'm just not a huge fan of the internet, so I don't really.
Okay.
Me personally, I just turn on to CNN headline news for the basic news, and then when the local news comes on, I usually pay attention to it, because the internet doesn't cover local news, and the TV does. The local TV stations do a fairly good job of that.
Do you think it's accurate enough, the news, or?
Mm-hmm.
I
wouldn't know, because I'm not out there covering the stories like they are. Again, we just have to trust them.
You know how you look when you can read the newspaper and you can listen to the story at the same time on the television almost. And, well, not the exact same time, but about the same time, and they're totally two different stories.
Well, the newspapers, they've had to go through the editors and stuff. It's been a big process, whereas the news, they're trying to get it out real soon on television, get it out immediately. And so oftentimes the newspapers are more accurate because they've had a lot more time and the information's been through a process.
So you would rather have the whole story than just bits and pieces of it? Well, thank you thank you, Bryan, and thank you, Sarah, for being here with us today. I'm Kyle Holleman.
And I'm Cyndy Williams.
The SAU Report is a production of broadcast journalism students in the Department of Theater and Mass Communication at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.